Hey friends, welcome back to another Seed Talk with Lisa and Layne. Hey Layne.
Hello, are you excited to talk about our little topic today?
I am because I feel like it's a very misunderstood process. So
It
I'm
is.
really thrilled to talk about because once you understand, it makes it simple to figure out what and when you should use them. All right, friends, before we jump in, I just want to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by thegardenersworkshop.com, where we just have it's an educational platform and an online garden shop. And we just invite you to go over there and fall in. You'll find, oh my goodness, blogs and videos and online courses and our garden shop full of all the things that you hear us mention, from the same seeds that I grow from, as well as the products that we use. So, Layne, let us in on what is the title of today's talk.
So today we're going to be talking about something that will help you get the most out of your cut flowers and maximize their vase life, and it's going to be flower conditioning. It can be really confusing to figure out which products to use and when, so we're going to cover all the products Lisa uses on her cut flower farm, and we'll walk through the products individually and then do an overview of the entire process for both flower farmers and home gardeners. And Lisa, maybe before we start, you should describe, what is flower conditioning? What do we mean when we say that?
Sure. So that's what we do to help the flowers last longer. When you cut a stem off of the mother plant, you cut their lifeline, all the hormones they were getting, all the nutrient and the moisture, all the things that kept the stem growing and looking beautiful, you just took it away. And putting it in straight water is okay for some, will do okay with that. But in general, most flowers benefit to last longer by giving them a little bit of help. And that's what flower conditioning products are.
Yeah, and we're going to try to move in a logical order. So we're going to take you from your harvest buckets out in the field all the way to when the flowers get to the end user in a vase inside someone's home.
Yes.
And by the way, we're going to be telling you the actual names of the products used at the farm, but of course there might be similar products available from other brands, so feel free to use whatever's the most convenient for you.
So that sounds good to me.
All right. Okay, so we're going to start out with a pre-treatment, and this is something that goes in every single one of Lisa's harvesting buckets. These are Chrysal CVBN tablets. What are these, Lisa? Why do you use them, and how do you use them?
Sure. So to just wrap it in a nutshell, it's a chlorine type tablet. And so this, we call it a pre-treatment because this goes into each one of our harvest buckets. Because what happens when you cut a stem, that stem hits the water surface, most stems, not all of them, but the majority, dump out some kind of debris out of their stem. You don't really see it, but I mean, a great visual. Have you ever cut a daffodil and seen all that goopy stuff come out? Well, most flowers do that, just not with that type of material coming out that's so obvious, right? So this tablet is intended to be just like chlorine in a pool kills bacteria and prevents stuff from growing. That's what the CVBN tablet does. And by putting that into each one of our buckets, when that stem hits the water surface, the debris still comes out, but it's the bacteria that doesn't develop because it's being stopped. And one of the things, because there's lots of home remedies for everything we're going to talk about, and the big difference, starting right here, between these types of products and home remedies is that home remedies are not stable. They don't usually last more than 8 or 12 hours. That means that you would have to change it twice a day and do it all over again. For instance, the Chrysal, CVBN tabs last up to 72 hours. And that just, especially for a flower farmer, I mean, you put it in your bucket, you drop the stems in, and you can use them after. They need to sit in it for at least 4 hours to totally benefit. Or if you need to leave them, they can sit in it for up to 72 hours. So it really prevents bacteria from developing. And that is just one more little piece of this big pie we're going to talk about to make your stems last longer ultimately for the end user.
Right. So this is just the very first step. It's a really tiny little tablet. It almost looks like the size of an aspirin or something. And there are dosage instructions right on the bottle. But in general, Lisa, you put one tablet in a gallon of water in your harvest buckets.
Correct. It comes with directions. And so the CVBN tablets used to be called, back in when they were first brought out, they used to be called Gerber tabs. Gerber daisies in the floral industry, is such a huge, in the commercial, I guess, imported business. And they are very susceptible to bacteria, and they also dump a lot, just like daffodils do, right? And so the Gerber tabs were really developed with them in mind. So Gerber daisies being one of the dirty dozen flowers that really benefits from the tab. They actually, for Gerber daisies, recommend a half a gallon per tab. It's a stronger dose, but in general, and the directions are right on the bottle, most flowers do really well with one tablet per 1 gallon of water.
That is a good point that if you are dealing with a flower that is in the dirty dozen, to make sure to read the instructions because you might want to do an increased dose. And these are especially important when you are harvesting those dirty dozen
Oh
flowers.
my goodness. I mean, and we grow, as flower farmers, we grow lots of flowers, zinnias, marigolds, sunflowers, amaranth are just four that come to mind. I mean, those flowers that if you ever in your home have ever put some of those in a clear vase and you look the next day and the water's really cloudy and dirty, that's exactly what's taken place. It dumped pollution, and the bacteria is in there like a bunch of piranhas just gobbling up all that debris. And that's what this helps to prevent.
So if these are in your harvest bucket water, Lisa, and that solution is active for up to 3 days, how long do your flowers typically stay in that original harvest bucket water?
In general, it's just overnight. So we would typically harvest on a Monday, let's just say, and then on Tuesday, those flowers would be moved on to the next step to be delivered out to florist or wherever they were actually going. But I also do want to say this is strictly a pre-treatment. There is no food value in this. This does not replace flower food at all.
So this is just mainly to keep that water clean.
Yes. While we definitely add one tablet to every bucket on our harvest. While not every single flower benefits from it, like basil doesn't need it. It doesn't really dirty the water. And Lysianthus is another one I can think of. But it is very confusing on a flower farm to say those three buckets over there don't have tablets. They're for basil. It sounds really simple, totally gets mixed up all the time. So our habit has become through the years is that every bucket gets a tablet, and that way we know that we're covered.
Okay, now we're going to move on to a product that we've mentioned a few times on the podcast, and it's by Floralife. It's called Quick Dip 100, and it's a hydrating treatment or hydrating solution. So, what is this all about, Lisa?
So this is it was developed for florists that, are receiving flowers that have typically been flown in from out of country, South America somewhere. They've been out of water sometimes for upwards of 2 weeks. And when they're brought in the back door of the flower shop, oftentimes they're wilty, as you could imagine, of being in a box for 2 weeks, right? And so this product was developed for those types of situations where the florist, they call it processing the flowers. I mean, most flower shops have a person in the back room that is just doing this stuff all day long, opening boxes, recutting the stems, and dipping them into something that's called, we just use the Floralife brand called Quick Dip, into a hydrator. And that hydrator literally helps the stems just absorb and take up more water. But the way that we've learned to use it, first off, for the first probably decade that I was aware of Quick Dip, I basically just used it to just like the florist did, dipping. We say Quick Dip, it's like you literally just dip the ends of the flowers into the ready-made mix. It's non-diluted for about 20 seconds or so. And then you just drop them into the CVBN tablet water or whatever stage you're in, right? However, I became privy, we sold flowers all these years to perhaps some of the most talented flower arrangers in our region. And one such woman who had been an arranger for almost 50 years was here one day sitting in a chair while I was packing up boxes of flowers for her. And she said, "What's wrong with that box of flowers over there?" And it was a box of Indian summer Rebecca, big blooms, very susceptible to wilting, no matter what even when you do everything right. And I said, "Oh, they're wilted. I can't get them to hydrate." And she said, "Well, did you put a splash of hydrator in the bucket?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I put about 2 tablespoons of hydrator, AKA quick dip, in every bucket of flowers that is at all questionable about wiltiness. And that way they just immediately get that extra drink and help prevent that from happening." So, with that said, hydrator like this goes into those buckets of those flowers that, even though I cut them early in the morning and we strip them hard enough and we bring them right inside, they're still kind of wilty. I'm thinking of yew basil, and I'm thinking of some of these Rebeccias. This morning we cut a ton of Rebeccias, and I told them put 2 tablespoons of hydrator in every one of those buckets, and we have no droopy Rebeccia here. So it works really, really well.
And we mentioned back in our hydrangea episode, which was episode 93, that it can really help to revive those as well.
Yes. I mean, if you really want to do an experiment, buy some roses at the grocery store or somewhere. You know how their heads, they just go down because they're wilty because there's no water coming up. Recut the stems, dip them in quick dip, and then drop them in a vase and look at them the next morning. All their heads have come up. I mean, it's really miraculous how it works.
So the dipping, that's more of the traditional use of it. The way you have opted to use it oftentimes is putting 2 tablespoons of it in about a gallon of water in your harvest buckets. Would you still put the CVBN tablets in as well?
Yes. And you will not find those instructions on the label.
What are some other flowers you can think of that you would use this on?
I mean, and the picture that we're looking at, that Triloba Rebecca, is a real susceptible one. Ami Magus, yarrow, just some of those ones that you just, and what the web method that I think of now is, it's like, why let them wilt? Why not just put it in the bucket and just let them just really drink up that first drink of fresh bacteria-free water and fill their stems up? And so we just do it on several of those. I mean, literally, sometimes there's a quick dip bottle in the drink holder on the golf cart.
And Chinese forget-me-nots, that's another one too.
Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm looking at some of the dried stuff that we have hanging around here. Yeah, Chinese forget-me-nots for sure. And also lambada can be wilty. But yeah, so I mean, in doubt, try it.
Okay, now we're going to move on to another Chrysal product, and it's called Professional 2 tea bags. And it's tea bags with the letter T, not tea as in the drink. And this is a holding solution. I know this one really trips people up, Lisa. What is a holding solution, and when would you use this?
Sure. First off, home gardeners do not need this.
Right.
This is not anything that a home gardener would need. So, holding solution is what we used as commercial flower farmers. So we've harvested on Monday, they've sat in the CVBN overnight, and then I'm going to pack an order for a florist the next day. Now, florists are just like flower farmers. They don't want the blooms to quickly open while they're at the shop. You want that to happen at your customer's home and, when the arrangement is made. So holding solution is basically like flower food, except it's got a low dose of the food portion of that recipe. So it's flower food, a pH balancer, which that keeps the water at the proper pH in there so that the stems can actually drink water. And then it also has a biocide in it. So it continues what the CVBN tablet has really begun, right? So it just gives those flowers just enough nutrition to keep them looking good, but to not push the blooms open. So that is why it's called holding. People that are holding flowers. If you're a flower farmer and you're going to put flowers in your cooler and you're not going to use them for, a couple, 3 days, this is what you can put in the water to keep the water clean and keep the flowers drinking, but give them just enough food to keep them happy. And the tea bag part of this, you can also get liquid holding solution or a tub of the powder. The powder that's in this tea bag. We love the tea bags because, I mean, it gets crazy on a flower farm, y'all. When we are packing 40 boxes, when I say boxes, we're talking about plastic boxes that have water in them. They're called percona boxes. And it's those square boxes that you see at florist shops. When we are filling those all up with water, and then we drop a tea bag into each box, we can all see that the tea bag's in there, that it's been treated. But more importantly than that, when our customers go to unpack their flowers to use them once they're delivered, they see that floating in there and say, oh my gosh, they really do use flower conditioning products. It's just another piece of you're a pro. So that's why I chose tea bags, and because we measure water, and this is pre-measured, so it's just really quick and efficient to do it that way.
Yeah, and it's just like a little sachet is what
Yeah,
the actual tea bag is. So it's really
right,
easy to drop in. So Lisa,
exactly.
let's say you've brought in flowers, they're harvested, they're in the water with the CVBN tablet. When would you move them to this? And how long would you be okay leaving them in this holding solution?
Sure. So for us, we never sat on flowers. I mean, our flowers typically moved out of here within about 48 hours, maybe the next morning. So typically they're harvested on one day, and then the next day they're moved on to their next step, whether that's flowers being packed for florists. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, which I highly recommend you check it out, that white box on the floor and those blue boxes up on the shelves, those are Percona boxes. And those were our customers' boxes. So when I dropped their flowers off this week, I would get boxes to take home empty to wash and to be able to fill them for the next week. So they were delivered to the florist the very next day, and they pretty much used them fairly quickly. Now, if I was holding flowers, which we typically just hardly ever did that unless we were having some kind of family event or something, because we would never promise flowers for an event and then hold flowers for that. We just never found that necessary. But I mean, they can sit in that holding solution for as many days as they need to if they're in the, cool conditions and all those types of things. But it's not made to sustain flowers for much more than 3 or 4 days, I would say.
And would you move them into a clean bucket of water and put this in it, or would you just add this into your harvesting bucket?
That's a great question. So yes, we would move them out of the CVB. I mean, you'll be amazed how dirty the water is. Even from just overnight, it's just a testimony to how much yuck comes out of stems, why you need the CVB in tablets, right? So we would often, especially when we had tons of buckets of flowers, I'd often think, all right, pull those flowers out and let me look in that bucket. Let's see if we can't reuse. And it's like always, because we have light colored buckets so we can see them, the water. It's like, no way can we reuse that. And yes, so all that water would be dumped on the lawn, and then we would, refill or put in a clean bucket, actually.
All right, so we've covered harvesting, we've covered holding, and now we're going to cover something that will ultimately be used when the flowers get to the end user, whoever's going to have them in their home. And this is flower food. This particular product is Chrysal Clear Universal Flower Food. When should flower food be used, Lisa, and why?
So probably the easiest thing, by the way, that image you have there is one of my most favorite bouquets.
Oh, me too.
Gorgeous. In a nutshell, flower food is for the end user. That is the person that's putting it in a vase, whether that's somebody you're giving it to, or you're selling them at the farmer's market, or they're taking them home from the supermarket. And so when we sell to florists, there's none of this involved, right? The florist should be providing that to their end customer after they make whatever they're going to make. But as farmers market vendors, or if you're selling to supermarkets, everybody got a packet of, and we use the larger packet for a quart of water. And so when we would do bouquets at supermarkets, that was rubber banded on the bottom. And at farmers market, we would just hand it to them. But this is basically like holding solution, but it just has more food nutrition in it. so that it just keeps the foliage green. It keeps the buds from opening. Sometimes on snapdragons and lysianthus both, their blooms will fade. That's, usually flower food will fix that. Just keeping them fed. It's not going to make them color up after they faded. But if you keep, if you use the flower food when you put them in the vase, that usually helps that. We tell people after about 4 days, you get your bouquet at the farmer's market, you take it home, you put it in the vase of the flower food. After, day 4 or so, we recommend that you just take your bouquet out of the vase, dump that water, rinse your vase out, trim an inch or so off of your bouquet because, flowers rot from the bottom up normally. And then we just say, just put them back in clear water. How long do you want your flowers to last? But using flower food again would just make the flowers last even longer. And not everybody wants to do that. So it's personal preference. I mean, we by all means don't give two to people. A 7 to 10 day bouquet is long enough life.
And something you touched on before is it really helps with the development of flowers. So a lot of times as a home gardener, I don't bother using flower food because I just have a plentiful garden to pick from, and I don't mind if they don't last as long, but it can really affect the development of certain flowers. So for example, snapdragons, Lisa, you might cut them very, very early. I may need to wait a little longer because if I cut them too early and then don't provide any flower food, sometimes those upper buds just don't seem to develop and open. And flower food can help with that if you are struggling with that issue.
Right.
Okay, so let's just do a recap from beginning to end, Lisa. Let's start pretending you're just a home gardener and walk through the products exactly as you'd use them if you're about to go outside and harvest some flowers.
Sure. So if, you want to help your flowers to last as long as possible, this is what I would do as a home gardener. I would have CVBN tablets on hand to use in my little harvest bucket for those flowers that are really the dirty dozen, especially if you grow a lot of zinnias and marigolds and even sunflowers. So I would definitely have CVBN tablets. And you want to just have on your shelf for the day that you might need it, is quick dip. This is the CPR. This is the emergency pack that you'll need when you need it. But then you just skip right over holding. You don't need that, but flower food is what you're going to put in the vase when you actually arrange your flowers. Flowers really benefit from resting after they've been cut. Again, y'all, you've just cut their lifeline, right? They need to sit for at least 4 hours after you've cut them to recover from what you've done, which is just a perfect time for them to drink clean CVBN bleach / chlorine. And I say bleach, a lot of people talk about using bleach, and bleach does kind of the same job, but it's only good for like 6 to 8 hours, so does or it doesn't. But anyway, so flower food is what you would put in your vase.
All right, now will you walk us through as if you're a flower farmer?
Okay, so flower farmers, flower conditioning products definitely make a difference in your deal. So we put CVBN tablets in every harvest container, and we just don't worry about who or what everybody goes in. We have available for those crops that need it, hydrator, which is quick dip, to put 2 tablespoons in a gallon of water in our buckets for those crops that are problems. They just wilt really no matter what. And this can help alleviate that. Now, depending on what you're doing with those flowers, let's just say it's Monday for us. All of our flowers at the first of the week typically would go to florists. That would mean they'd sit in the CVBN overnight. And the next day, the orders were all taken on Monday. Tuesday morning, we would start packing those Percona boxes that belong to our customers. We'd fill them with the appropriate water, and we'd drop a tea bag for holding solution into each one of those boxes. Then that is taken away and delivered, and that's the end of that story. Now, if we also have subscription service, and some of those flowers on that Monday harvest would be made into mixed bouquets to be delivered for a drop-off. So they would just be made into bouquets, dropped into a bucket, literally with just water, because they're literally going to be delivered in just a few hours. But they have flower food rubber banded to each one of them so that customer can put that into the vase.
And that customer is going to be happier with the results they're going to get from using the flower food, which is going to give them a positive outlook on your flowers.
Yes. And you know what we should say also, because I know I sold to supermarkets and I know a lot of people do. We do that same basic steps, except the bouquets go into those black supermarket buckets that most flower farmers know what I'm speaking of. They actually make a tea bag that's half this. This is made for a gallon. It's the half-gallon size, and it's the same thing. Those bouquets are just going to be sitting in that bucket waiting for somebody to buy them at the store. And that keeps your flowers looking great and lasting longer in that bucket, and they'll last longer for your customer.
All right, well, that was it for our flower conditioning product episode. I hope that covered from A to Z, whether you're a home gardener or a flower farmer, some steps you can do to help your flowers be their best and last their longest. So thanks so much for joining us again. If you're enjoying Seed Talk, please make sure to share it with a friend and follow or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. And as I always say, we really appreciate your ratings and reviews in a podcast app and your likes and comments over on YouTube. And thank you so much for joining us again.
Layne, thanks for another great episode. And friends, just another reminder that we have a YouTube channel. And Layne puts together a beautiful slideshow that I recommend you go over there and take a peek at it, because you can see sometimes the flowers and just have a visual. And of course, you can see our faces. And so, friends, thanks so much for joining us here. We love bringing you this. And remember to drop in over at thegardenersworkshop.com. Till we meet again, friends. Ciao.
Bye.